Hey everyone, it's Stephanie here with my January 2016 paper doll layout. For this month, I decided to base my layout on the movie Big. This was one of my favorite movies growing up, and I probably seen it so many times that I had the whole thing memorized, and probably drove my mom completely crazy singing Shimmy Shimmy Cocoa Pop all over the house for probably months on end. So I really wanted to include this one in my album just because it was such a big part of my childhood. So I went ahead and stamped this image onto the text paper. This is the same downloadable dictionary paper that I think I shared in my December layout. It's just a download from Etsy, and I can just keep printing it out as I need it, so I really love that. And I'm going to go ahead and stamp his clothes. I picked this kind of wild pattern paper piece here because it kind of looks like the shirt he was wearing in the scene where he's on the large piano. So I was trying to replicate that. And then I stamped his shoes on this, just on the white area of this striped pattern paper here. I like to use a pattern piece of paper versus just a white cardstock piece because it adds a little bit more texture because there's usually some kind of soft print in the background. So now I'm just taking my Copic markers and coloring in his skin and his hair like I normally do. I'm just using E00 and E11 for the skin area. And for his hair, I'm using E57, E59, and E55. I usually start with the E55, which is the lightest brown color. And then by the time I'm finished, you don't even see it. So I don't really know if it's worth my time to use it or if it kind of adds to the finished shading look of the hair. But I like to always start with that one first. So I used, like I said, the two lighter colors first, and then I just added this darker color in to kind of darken up his hair and make it look a little bit more like Tom Hanks' hair in the movie. I think it's still a little bit too brown, but that's okay. It works, I think. So I left it as is and went ahead and cut out all the pieces for his clothes. So you can see here now the jeans look a little bit different from when I originally stamped them, and that's because I didn't really like the pattern paper I used, so I ended up restamping them. And then I didn't like this one either because it looked completely flat, so I didn't like that. So I decided to actually color over this light pair with Copic markers, and I'm just showing my coloring here in very fast speed mode. It took me a really long time to color these, and I think it was because of the paper I was coloring on, because this is just a sheet of pattern paper. It's not really a Copic type paper, and I could not get those colors to blend, and it was kind of a hot mess. So I just kept working it though and just kind of kept adding color and blending, and finally I got it to look like a textured pair of blue jeans, and I was so happy with these when I finished. So I'm glad I kind of persevered and just kind of kept coloring and coloring and coloring until I got them how I wanted them. So once I was finished, I just went ahead and cut those out as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and adhere all of the clothes onto the doll image like I normally do. I also stamped that shirt a second time, and just so I would have the sleeves of it to be on like the white, not even a white, it's like a beige pattern paper. And then I used my Copic markers to add a bit of shading to the clothes as well, just because I think it makes them look a little bit more realistic when they're finished. So the outfit isn't exactly what he was wearing. He did have a jacket on, and the shirt he was wearing was actually a collar shirt, but I'm limited with the boy stamps that I have, so like I always say, I just try and make it work with what I have, and I felt like adding that kind of wild pattern paper to the front really kind of mimicked the shirt he was wearing, so I think it worked out pretty well. So I added his jeans on first, and like I said, I really love how they ended up looking. Once the ink kind of absorbed into that paper, it really evened out, and they just looked really shaded and way more realistic than the original two pairs I started with. So I'm just using my liquid glue pen and adding all of the clothes pieces on top. And once I have it fully done, I'm going to just put my block on top to kind of hold everything in place and make sure it fully dries. And then I'm going to move on to the piano piece. So what I did for this is I just went online and found like a printable piano sheet to teach someone how to play piano. And I found one that would be big enough scale to work with the doll image that I have. And I just printed it out with my laser printer, and I did that because I'm going to be adding a little bit of shading with Copics, and that's going to make sure that none of that ink bleeds that I printed with. Now you can really barely even see what I'm doing here because it's so light, but in real life you can kind of see the slight shading on the keys, and it just makes it look a little bit more dimensional and not so flat looking once I had the piece finished. So even though you can barely see what I'm doing in the video, this little gray shading really adds to the overall image and really adds to the design once I have everything finished. So once I have all of the shading done, I'm going to set the piano aside and cut out the paper doll. So I'm just using my scissors and cutting out along the stamped line. I like to cut him out after I've already added his clothes, just because it makes it so much easier to cut out since I have multiple layers of cardstock, and it just makes it a little bit thicker and easier to work with. So now that I have all of the pieces cut out, I'm going to go ahead and work on the layout. I printed my quote onto a piece of graph paper. I was going to try and recreate kind of the scene in full that is the part that I'm doing for this layout, but I didn't really know how to show the mall behind him, and I figured I would end up making it look like a hot mess. So I decided just to kind of go neutral with the background and let the focus be on the paper doll and the piano at the bottom. So I just printed the quote. I went to bed one night and I was a kid, and I woke up and I was a grown-up. It's just one of my favorite parts of the movie. And then I added the piano onto the bottom area. I didn't like the piano directly against the bottom of the layout, so I added a piece of black cardstock just to create kind of a thin line of black cardstock before the piano actually starts in the layout, and I liked that a lot better. Now, I did find that once I had the black cardstock on, though, the keys on the piano looked a little bit not as black as the cardstock. So I just used my black Memento marker and just quickly went over each of those keys and colored them in just to really make them black and really stand out on the layout. So once I have those all colored in, the background area of this layout is ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere the doll onto the layout. Once I kind of set him on there, I realized I wanted to add a little bit more shading to his clothes. I felt like he looked a little bit one-dimensional, and I wanted to add a little bit more to him just to kind of make him look a little bit more realistic, and I realized I had forgotten the shading on his shoes. So I just took a gray Copic marker and added a little bit more shading to the seams of his shirt and his pants, and then added some shading to his shoes as well. Once I was happy with how he looked, I just went ahead and added some adhesive to the back of him and added him directly onto the layout. I felt like when I finished this, it was a little bit plain. I knew I wouldn't have been able to do the mall scene behind him, so I liked that I just kind of put the graph paper to keep the focus on just him and the piano, but I still felt like it was really, there was a lot of white space around him. So I decided just to add a couple of music notes to the area directly beside him, just to kind of show like the scene when he was playing the chopsticks and stuff on the piano. It just kind of made it look like, music was happening even though you don't hear anything. So I just felt like it filled up the space a little bit. I kept them pretty muted in color just with some gray cardstock, and just added a couple of those on either side of him just to fill up a little bit of that space. And then once I had that done, I felt like it kind of completed the layout and fully showed the scene I was trying to show. So I really hope you enjoyed this month's layout. I'm excited to start another year of paper doll layouts featuring quotes from my favorite movies and TV shows. And I really hope that you will join me in the next video. Thanks so much for watching.